Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
Be ruthless, not with others, but with your standard. Because the world does not suffer those who hesitate, it steamrolls them. It turns the man who overthinks into the man who's overlooked. In a society that rewards conformity and celebrates politeness as virtue, ruthlessness becomes rebellion, not the kind that bleeds others, but the kind that refuses to bleed for illusions. You must become a man who slices through his own excuses. The moment you feel comfort luring you back into softness, you cut it off. You don't negotiate with laziness. You don't empathize with weakness inside yourself. You strangle hesitation in its cradle. And you do it not with anger, but with cold precision. Because you've seen what happens when you play nice with mediocrity. It builds a cage around your mind. And no man builds an empire from a cage. Be ruthless in your decisions. People think danger is volume, but real danger is certainty. The man who says no and doesn't flinch. The man who ends things when they no longer serve the mission. You don't pause to justify it. You don't ask for understanding. You act. Indecision is where dreams rot. You cannot build with half commitments. You cannot conquer with one foot still in the swamp. When you feel resistance, you attack. When you smell comfort, you burn it. That's not aggression, it's clarity. You move like time is hunting you, because it is. And if you're not ruthless about how you move through the world will move through you, leaving nothing behind but potential you were too soft to claim. Be ruthless with your time. Protect it like it's your oxygen, because it is. Don't entertain people who drain it. Don't indulge thoughts that sabotage it. Don't waste minutes justifying your grind to the uninspired. You weren't born to be understood. You were born to become undeniable. And that requires time. Deep, uninterrupted, sacred time. You treat your calendar like a war plan. Each block of effort is an attack, each hour a weapon. There are no passive days, there are only days claimed or days surrendered. And when others relax, you refine. When they scroll, you strike. Because time doesn't repeat, it reveals. It shows who's willing to bleed now, so they don't have to beg later. Be ruthless, because the clock already is. Be ruthless in your focus. In a world addicted to stimulation, your ability to lock in is your greatest rebellion. You don't multitask, you mutilate distraction. You don't wait for flow, you create the conditions that force it. Phone away, mind still, intent sharp. You give yourself to the task in front of you like it's the only thing that exists. Because in that moment, it is. The man who can sit alone, undisturbed, unbothered, unbothered. That man becomes unstoppable. Focus is the quiet violence that separates performers from pretenders. It's not loud, it's surgical, and the man who wields it ruthlessly cuts through the noise of modern life like a blade through silk. Be ruthless with your habits. Not 1 inch of leniency, not one exception. You don't feel like training, you train harder. You don't have time to read, you eliminate what made you say that. Your rituals aren't optional, they are law. Because you know what happens when you break them. One skipped workout becomes a week. One missed deep work session becomes procrastination. You don't give weakness room to breathe, you choke it at birth. Your habits are your generals. Your routines are your battle plan, and every day you follow them, you march forward, inch by inch, day by day, until your life is no longer recognizable. Not because of luck, but because of discipline applied with ruthlessness. Be ruthless in what you tolerate from yourself. That internal dialogue, you dominate it. The moment your mind whispers, "Take it easy," you laugh. You increase the pressure. You prove to yourself daily that comfort has no dominion over you. You are not a citizen of ease. You are a soldier of effort. That means when your body aches, you double down. When your mind resists, you override. You build a voice inside that doesn't ask for approval, it gives order. And when that voice speaks, you obey. Because you trained it in the fire. You gave it authority through repetition, and now it rules, not by chance, but by conquest. That's what it means to be ruthless with yourself. Be ruthless in your solitude. Cut off everything that dilutes you. If the crowd weakens your fire, walk alone. If their dreams don't match your mission, turn the volume down. Solitude isn't loneliness, it's recalibration. It's sharpening. It's where you hear your real voice without the distortion of society. You weren't made to blend. You were made to stand apart, to lead. And leaders don't need the noise of the world to validate their fire. They light their own path, and the world either follows or burns trying to catch up. When you're alone, you're dangerous. Because you can't be swayed. You've already made peace with walking the path few dare to tread. Be ruthless in your standard. What you accept is what you become. If you let mediocrity slide, it becomes your ceiling. So you set the bar where others break and then raise it again. Every win is temporary, every improvement expected. You're not here for applause, you're here for evolution. The man you were 6 months ago, dead. The man you are today, temporary. You are a constant demolition of the old and a relentless construction of the next level. That means no softness, no excuses, just war. A daily war against complacency, dilution, and stagnation. Because greatness doesn't visit the comfortable. It resides in the fortress of the disciplined. And only the ruthless get the key. Be ruthless with your exit. When something no longer serves the mission, you walk. No explanations, no guilt. If a friend becomes dead weight, drop him. If a routine stops producing results, replace it. You don't mourn the old system. You upgrade. Loyalty to growth trumps loyalty to comfort. You don't owe anyone stagnation. You owe yourself progress. That kind of clarity cuts. It offends. It triggers, but it also frees. Because you weren't put on this earth to babysit dysfunction. You were born to build, to ascend, to impact. And that ascent requires weight reduction. So let them judge, let them misunderstand. You didn't come to be liked, you came to conquer. Be ruthless in your identity. The world will try to rename you through trends, through labels, through narratives you never wrote. But your identity is not up for auction. You define it, you defend it, you sharpen it until it becomes a sword they can't look away from. That means you don't bend, you don't shrink, you don't apologize for being committed to your growth. There is no penalty more corrosive than the one you inflict on yourself through inaction. When a vision arrives, clean, vivid, feral, and you cage it with hesitation, it begins to decay. Not just the idea, but you. A vision unexecuted is not dormant. It festers, it haunts. It gnaws at the edges of your ambition like a virus disguised as delay. And the more you postpone, the more your identity fractures. You know what you saw, you know what could have been done, and you let it die anyway. The loss isn't the dream, it's the version of you who trusted himself to build it. That trust erodes. Slowly at first, then catastrophically. You lose 100% of unexecuted visions. But worse, you lose yourself. You cannot lie to your subconscious. Every time you betray an idea by leaving it unfinished, your mind records the betrayal. It doesn't care what excuse you used. Too busy, too risky, too tired. All it knows is this: when you receive vision, you do nothing, and that becomes your identity. Not by choice, but by repetition. The more half-built dreams you stack, the heavier the weight of disbelief becomes. You stop seeing yourself as a builder. You become a man who starts fires but lets them die in the wind. You speak with less certainty. You walk with less conviction, because every blueprint you abandoned became a brick in the prison of self-doubt. And over time, your dreams don't stop arriving. They just stop trusting you. Execution is more than action. It is psychological warfare. Every time you build, you send a message to your psyche: I follow through. That message compounds. 1 hour of focused creation echoes louder than 1,000 hours of indecision. When you finish what you start, you sculpt a self-image that cannot be shattered. You become a man who backs himself without needing applause. A man who carries weight in silence because he has proof, not theory. But when you stop at 80%, when you get close enough to feel the heat but never step into the fire, you anchor failure into your identity. Not external failure, internal betrayal. That kind of betrayal, it stays. Long after the applause would have faded, long after the risk is gone, it lives in your blood. The brain isn't built to hold unused visions. It's built to act on them. Every creative impulse that arrives is a command. Ignore it and your mind begins to mistrust itself. You wonder why motivation dies, why clarity fades, why you can't feel the same spark you used to. It's because the engine stopped believing in its driver. You received the maps, you received the fuel, but you refused to drive. So now the engine stutters. It waits. And you become reliant on outside stimulus to move. A comment, a crisis, a comparison, when, in truth, all you ever needed was to keep building, to follow through on the whisper before the scream became necessary, because once your own mind starts questioning your word, the collapse isn't loud, it's slow, subtle, unrelenting. Unexecuted visions rot in the corners of your character. They gather dust like abandoned blueprints in a war room you never entered. You told yourself you'd get to them, when it felt right, when the timing was perfect. But timing doesn't create execution, decision does. The man who waits to feel ready builds nothing, but the man who acts before certainty, he builds identity. And that identity becomes steel because it is forged in movement. Every finished project, no matter how small, becomes a pillar. And over time, those pillars become a temple, an architecture of self-trust. But half-finished ideas? They look harmless, but they hollow you from the inside out until your confidence collapses under the weight of what could have been. There are men who dream, and there are men who ship. The difference isn't intelligence, it's ruthlessness. Ruthlessness in choosing to finish. Ruthlessness in choosing to be judged on what exists rather than praised for potential. Because potential is a drug, and the addict loves talking about what he could do. But the builder? He works, he bleeds, he ships, and with every completed vision he becomes heavier, more grounded, more real. The world respects completion. It doesn't care how brilliant the idea was, only that it was born. You either carry the burden of unfinished work, or you carry the armor of completion. One weighs you down, the other makes you bulletproof. You wonder why self-belief dies. It's not because you weren't good enough, it's because you trained yourself to distrust your own word. You said you'd start. You didn't. You said you'd finish, you bailed, and your mind, brilliant as it is, begins to compensate. It lowers the ambition, it softens the vision. Not because it wants to, but because it no longer believes you'll honor it. That's the cost of unexecuted vision. It's not guilt, it's identity erosion. Until one day you wake up with the same body, same brain, but no fire. And all the candles are still there, just unlit, because you stopped showing up to strike the match. Execution doesn't demand perfection, it demands closure. When you follow through, flawed, messy, raw, you complete the loop. You tell your system, we finish what we start. And that loop becomes sacred. The more loops you close, the less noise you carry, the less guilt, the less anxiety. Because your system is clean, your mind knows that when vision arrives, it matters. That psychological alignment is priceless, and it's only built by doing. Talking doesn't build it. Reading doesn't build it. Only the ruthless act of pushing something to completion, even when it hurts, cements the belief. I am the man who delivers. That belief can carry you through storms, but only if you earn it. You are not suffering from a lack of creativity, you're suffering from a lack of closure. Your graveyard of half-built dreams is not harmless. It is radioactive, and the longer you leave them buried, the more they contaminate your clarity. You keep trying to build new things, but the ghosts of the unfinished whisper. Why try again? That whisper gets louder until it becomes identity, until it becomes truth, and then no new idea survives, because your belief system has been rigged against itself. The only cure? Finish. Execute. Deliver. Even if it's flawed, even if it scares you. Because the man who finishes once has more fire than the man who started 1,000 times. Care is often misinterpreted as commitment, but in truth, it is frequently the leash, the desire to be seen as good, to be understood, to be liked. It's a quiet disease, one that bleeds your edge without you noticing. You don't need to care to create impact. In fact, the moment you overcare, your decisions become distorted, your execution gets softened, your language gets filtered, and your fire gets extinguished by the approval you crave. You begin to perform, not from principle, but from fear. Fear of disapproval, fear of rejection, fear of standing alone. But the man who operates from detachment isn't swayed. He moves not because he's liked, but because the mission demands it. His sharpness cuts cleaner because it's not dulled by emotion. Detachment doesn't mean apathy. It means precision. The need to be liked is the great corrupter of potential. It takes the truth you were meant to speak and wraps it in layers of compliance. It takes the risks you were born to take and buries them beneath permission-seeking. And worst of all, it feeds your ego with temporary validation while starving your soul of real growth. You don't need to be hated, but you need to become immune to being liked. You need to reach a state where applause feels irrelevant, because your own standard is louder. You must speak what is necessary, build what is needed, and move with a clarity so clean that approval feels like noise. Detachment isn't ice, it's fire without smoke. It's the absence of dependency. And that absence, that's what creates gravity. There's a reason leaders who shake the world aren't obsessed with being admired. They're obsessed with being accurate. They do what works, they say what cuts, they walk the line others avoid because it offends. And when it does, they don't flinch. Because their North Star isn't comfort, it's consequence. They measure impact in change, not in cheer, and that's what makes them unforgettable. When you're detached from perception, you become dangerous, not because you intend to harm, but because you no longer dilute your intent to be digestible. The craving to be liked is a sedative. But detachment? That's performance enhancing. It sharpens your words, hardens your resolve. It removes the middleman between your vision and your execution. You don't need to be liked to build something that matters. You need to be unshakable. People who chase impact through empathy alone often become slaves to the reactions of others. Every post, every project, every message analyzed not for alignment, but for applause. They ask, will this resonate? When they should ask, is this true? But the detached creator? He doesn't guess, he delivers. His art is not swayed by algorithms. His strategy isn't built on likes. He moves from core, not consensus. And because of that, his output hits harder. His brand feels heavier because there's no pretending. There's no compromise, just raw, unapologetic clarity. And clarity, when wielded without neediness, becomes legend. Those who must be loved cannot lead, and those who lead cannot crave. So kill the craving, and watch your performance sharpen like a blade honed in solitude. Detachment is the ultimate amplifier of excellence. It removes the friction that emotion adds to precision. You no longer waste energy wondering how your work will be received, you just build. You no longer dilute your message to soften impact, you just speak. And the result? Clean dominance. Because every ounce of energy once spent seeking approval is now spent executing at a higher frequency. Detachment is not numbness, it's alignment. You are no longer guided by public opinion, but by inner calibration. That internal compass becomes sacred, and the more you protect it, the more unstoppable you become. Care clouds, craving kills, but detachment, that frees. You don't rise by being loved. You rise by being undeniable. You must learn to walk into a room and not scan for comfort, but command. You must learn to express, not to be heard, but to be understood later. Detachment teaches you patience with your impact. It may not be applauded today, but it was precise. And in time, truth echoes louder than noise. Your message, your work, your essence. It all becomes heavier when it isn't warped by the urge to please. Stop trying to be relatable, be irrefutable. People follow certainty, and certainty is born in detachment. When you no longer beg to be received, you begin to transmit at a frequency others didn't even know existed. That's where power lives, not in connection for the sake of comfort, but in clarity for the sake of consequence. Most men stay average because their effort is entangled with identity. They think failure means they are failures, that rejection means they are unwanted. But detachment cuts the cord between effort and ego. When you're detached, you can fail without flinching. You can pivot without shame, because your identity is not in how you're seen, it's in how you move. That shift creates momentum. It removes the emotional toll of setback, it allows for brutal iteration. And that's where excellence is born. Not in coddled creativity, but in fearless repetition. The world doesn't need another agreeable voice. It needs a clean instrument, one that speaks, acts, and moves without seeking applause. That instrument is the detached performer, cold in focus, relentless in output, unfazed by the crowd. When your work is tied to the desire to be accepted, you betray it. Every time, the joke gets softened, the art gets compromised, the risk gets cancelled. But when you kill that craving, your work begins to speak for you. It becomes alive, sharp, charged with truth. And truth offends, but it also liberates. You want to be remembered? Let your work polarize, let it stand, let it slap the sleep out of people's eyes, not because you wanted to stir them, but because you refuse to serve them lies. The detached creator doesn't ask, "How will they take it?" He asks, "Did it hit? And if it did, then the job is done." Detachment is the mother of performance. It is the root of every master, not because they don't feel, but because they don't fold. Their decisions are insulated, their vision is sovereign, and their moves calculated without compromise. You don't owe the world comfort. You owe it clarity. You don't owe them likability. You owe them impact. And impact never comes from the agreeable. It comes from the audacious, the exact, the unmoved. So silence the need, detach, and become a storm they can't categorize.